box office for Arjun, Reddy, and Baadshaho and what it all really means. This is a lot of numbers and it's kind of boring, so to entertain you, I'm also going to brush my hair for the day while I talk. So, Arjun, Reddy. This is really the big story, but what's important is to keep a sense of exactly how big this story is and how small. So, yes, it's a huge deal that an offbeat film like this is doing so well at the American box office. But keep in mind that America is the traditional market for Telugu films. Telugu films always do better here than Punjabi, often than Hindi, usually even than Tamil films. So Arjun, Reddy is making about $2,500 per screen in its second week, which is good for a Telugu film, but far from unheard of. What's a little more remarkable is that it actually added screens in its second week. That's kind of unusual for any movie, especially a Telugu film, which tends to peak opening weekend. So that's a sign that it has good word of mouth, which is great. It's also a sign it's probably going to have a long run if it's going up in the second week. But again, it's not breaking records, it's not huge at the box office. It appears that it is because it is the most successful Indian film from any language that released this weekend. And that includes Baadshaho. Baadshaho did terribly in the US. And Shiv Mangal Savdan, which also released, only did slightly better per screen. In general, it was just a bad weekend for Indian films. The simplest way to look at it is Arjun, Reddy is the top of the list, the most successful Indian film in America right now, but it's only 28 at the overall American box office, compared with, say, Bahubali 2, which was number 3 of all films in America, not just Indian films. And that's not unusual. Often the top Indian film for the weekend will be at least in the top 20 of the general American box office. So Arjun, Reddy, in general, is just not doing that well. It's more that all the other movies, Indian and otherwise actually, but mostly Indian, are doing very poorly in America right now. What's more interesting is how Arjun, Reddy is doing in other markets. It actually opened in Canada and Australia, which are not traditional markets for Telugu films. It's only on a handful of screens in those places, but it is doing very, very, very well on those screens. So that's Arjun, Reddy, doing extremely well in America for an offbeat Telugu film, beating all the other Indian films in America because the American audience doesn't like any of the others at all. What about Baadshaho, the other big release for this week? Baadshaho is very interesting because it's got a very different release depending on where you are in the world. In America, it's doing extremely poorly, less than 2,000 per screen, which is almost unheard of for a major Hindi release. I think even Shiv did slightly better than that. However, in Australia and Canada, it's doing extremely well, which is a sign of how the global audience is increasingly getting bifurcated. Australia and Canada traditionally go towards Punjabi films and also action films, so they like Baadshaho. America and the UK, not so much. Baadshaho is doing terribly there. Arjun, Reddy hasn't opened in the UK yet, but if it does, I suspect it will also do very well there, just like it does in America. The global audience is no longer just one global audience. It's different place to place. So that's what's going on globally. How about within India? The Indian numbers are always harder to find and harder to trust because they're a bit of a guess versus the global numbers, which are based on a third-party system that is extremely reliable. So within India, Baadshaho is winning the weekend, but just barely. I think what I've heard is that it's at about 50 crore right now, which is good for a major release, especially on a holiday weekend. But it's not spectacular. It's definitely going to make back its budget. It's a respectable hit in India. Arjun, Reddy, meanwhile, is making somewhere around the mid-30s, which is very impressive for the kind of film it is. First, a Telugu film, so it had less of an all-India release, I'm sure, than Baadshaho did. And second, an offbeat film with drugs, kissing, sex, an A certificate. This is very exciting. Again, it's not record-breaking, we have to keep that in mind, but it it is a sign that a movie like this, a movie that everybody would say couldn't possibly do well, actually can find an audience. Anyway, that's how it looks to me. That's what I'm seeing from the box office figures. You can agree, you can disagree, you can add something else. Just hop on over to my blog, Don't Call It Bollywood, and leave me a comment. Thanks!